Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. Okay. My last video, I think I raised more questions than I did answers. So I wanted to go back over. Tim asked me to give him a little more information about this little fella right here. So let me talk about this, but in order to do that, I need to explain this and what all this has to do with what I'm doing in my shop. This is a Riden, R-I-D-E-N. And this is the RD60 series. That means that it has 60 volt. You can put up to 60 volts out on this thing. Now it is a buck converter, basically. Even though it's programmable and does all sorts of things, it only puts out based on what you put in. It runs on the DC current, so you have to have some kind of DC power supply. And they make this in a kit, where you can get this programmable panel, buck converter, and you get the power supply and the case, and you get all the pieces. This is about a $250 unit. Now you can buy just the panel, and they make smaller ones. In fact, Riden even they make a DPS series, DPS 50, where it's 50 volts is what you get out of that one. And it comes in different amperages too, just like this one. But it's a little smaller, doesn't have the keyboard, and it doesn't have quite as many features as this one does. This is one I zeroed in on. Now on the RD60 series, excuse me, on the RD60 series, you can get this in a 6 amp, 12 amp, 18 amp, or 24 amp. That's the amount of current you can output on it. So this actually can be a powerful little unit. And I needed something a little stronger. Up to now, for a power supply, I've been using my AT box, which if you remember, I did that, I think, a year or so ago. And it was just a panel that I bought that plugged right into the plug-in on the ATX box. And it gave me different power outlets of different voltages, 12 volts, 5 volts, and 3 volts, or something along that line. But the amperage is also very small, less than 5 amps, I think, is what it was. So it really isn't enough for me to do some of the things I want to do with Ryobi batteries. Ryobi runs at 20 volts, so the ATA box right there already was kind of a problem. I'm actually using a buck boost converter on that one to give me some higher voltage. I think it goes up to 30 volts, but again, 5 amps. So that isn't all that many amps that you're really getting, or that many watts to be able to do some of the things that I want to be able to test and to do and that sort of thing. So I need a little more horsepower, and that's why I finally zeroed in on this one. This should get me by for a couple of years at least, and maybe I won't have to go any stronger than this. But again, this thing is $250 by the time you buy all the components. I just didn't want to spend that much money. So I bought the module itself, and that's around, I think I paid $95 for it. You can get it off of Amazon. You can get it off of AliExpress. I'll try to remember to put links to this unit on both of them. But the RD60 series is a pretty good unit. They all look like this. They just have the different amperage ratings of what they output. So you have to decide what you are going to want. You don't necessarily have to get the biggest and the strongest. In fact, they make a 24 amp of this. And this is the 18. 18 was more than enough for my needs. So I stuck with this one. And the difference in price between the 12 amp hour and the 18 amp hour was like $5, I think. But the difference between this one and the 24 amp hour one is like an additional $40 or $50. So this was the last of the least expensive ones, and the biggest and the best at this point is by far quite a bit more than any of the others. So that's why I zeroed in on this one. It's more than adequate, and I think it'll do me for a long time to come. You do have to have some kind of power supply in. So rather than getting their 65 volt input, I went with a 24 volt. This is 24 volts, 15 amps. So about 360 watts. That should be enough for the things that I want to do, because most of the things I want to do revolve around Ryobi batteries or 12-volt batteries. And I'm working on 12-volt systems and 24-volt systems. But because it can do up to 60 volts, and I'm only going to use a 24-volt one for most of my needs, but I do want to be able to go to a 60 volts tester if I decide I need to do that. So that's why I was also working on this little 3 batteries in series. Gives me 60 volts. So I can take 3 batteries, wire it up, and plug it in. Instead of plugging in my power supply, my regular 24 volt, I can plug this in to it, and that'll give me a 60 volt base. Because again, it only puts out whatever you can put in. So if I'm only putting 24 volts in, I can't go up to 60 volts coming out. I can only go up to 23 volts. You lose about a volt or so based on the converting the power when you reduce it. So that's why the amount of volts you put in can make a difference as to what you can output on this thing. That's okay. And like I said, most of the time, this is going to be more than adequate. So I'll be happy with this system. If I need to get more than 24 volts for whatever I'm doing, I can throw 3 batteries together. I am going to make my own little pack plug-in, because this thing is, how do I want to put it? It's right now it's kind of bulky, and it's not something I would normally want to use this with. So it'll be convenient to be able to use this instead of this in most cases. The other thing about this thing when I bought it is this also has not only just straight volts out with the positive and the negative terminal, but it has this green terminal too. And instead of using the red terminal, if I use the green terminal, then this thing can be used to actually charge lithium batteries. So in other words, if I want to charge my Ryobi batteries using this power supply, the 24-volt power supply on here, I can charge these up to 20 volts without any problem through that green terminal instead of using the red terminal, because that has what they call the bulk charging, and then when it gets above a certain saturation, then it goes to a floating capability, so that you can then get the last of the voltage pushed into that and get it to its fullest amount from that. Most lithium batteries inherently, when you get a charger, that's what you got to be able to do. So, and I should be able to control it and do that with this without any problem. The problem I have is that on my system, that if we talk about this for just a second, then I think we'll be done. What I am trying to do here is, most of the time here in the Midwest in the United States, in Wisconsin, and well, actually the whole country, you can get power outages. I guess you can in the whole world, really. And that can be inconvenient. And that's one of the things I try to gear toward, is that if my power goes out for a couple hours, I'd like to be able to plug a power pack into my television and at least sit there and watch a little TV rather than sit there staring in the dark. Have a little light and that sort of thing. Because you do lose your power around here probably 2-3 times a year. Usually only for a couple, 3, 4, 5 hours. But I've had it off for as long as a week. And I know down in some areas of the country, it's been longer than that when it's gone out because of natural disasters. So I want to be as prepared for that as I can. And if I'm using my Ryobi batteries and a couple of lithium 12-volt batteries I have from my power sources, I have to be able to charge them back up fast. Especially, in particular, my Ryobi batteries. If you're just charging up most of your batteries, the normal Ryobi battery charger only charges at around 2 amps. And that means that if you put a 2 amp hour battery in the charger, it'll charge it up in an hour. That's what they used to brag about, how you can charge your batteries up in an hour, back when that's the biggest battery you could get years ago. But since then, they've gone to the 5 amp, and you can get up to a 9 amp hour battery now from in a Ryobi style. Well, in most of these tool batteries. I'm talking about Ryobi because that's what I use, but most of what I talk about here does apply to the other tool batteries also. And I like to use this for power in the house when I'm not using it to power my Ryobi stuff, like my lawnmower and my power tools and that. And the 9 amp hour gives you a lot of power. Problem is on a Ryobi charger, if I run this thing dry and I need to recharge it, a 9 amp hour battery will take 4.5 hours to charge on a Ryobi charger. And if I'm in a down system where I don't have power, I'm off grid because I'm forced off, I don't want to wait 4.5 hours after I use this battery up to get it charged up again. I want to charge this back up. Now, what I know about batteries, in particular, I'm talking about the cells that they use in these things. These are a high capacity cell, and that you can actually pull a 1C rating. You can pull 1C off of these batteries. So I should be able to pull 9 amps off of this thing in an hour without any damage to it. Same thing with the 5 amp hour. I should be able to pull 5 amps out of it. I actually pulled this at a 2C rate. I pulled 10 amp hours off of both of these from fully charged to empty and then recharged them. So they'll actually put out quite a bit on what they can do. They don't tell you that. They don't want you to do that. And really, you shouldn't do that all the time because that will shorten the life of your battery if you're always doing that. But when I'm off grid, it's different than in my normal everyday life. Normally, I just charge them down some, use them in tools and that, and then I plug them in and let them charge up slowly. And that's what gives them the longevity. No. Here. Come on, go on. Yes, it's Missy, bothering me. Go on, go lay down. Go on. Anyway, she's quite a handful these days. I could tell you stories about her all day. So anyway, but I do want to charge these back up sometimes in less than an hour if I can. So there's no reason why I can't charge these at a 1C rate if I want to. I don't want to do it all the time, but in an off-grid situation, it would be nice to be able to take a 9 amp hour battery and charge it up in an hour. And you can't do that with a Ryobi charger. That is one of the things this thing will help me do, is I can do some experiments and make sure that I can do that with these batteries without any problem during an off-grid situation. So one of the things that I intend on making is my own battery chargers to be able to take a Ryobi battery and plug it in. And what I want to be able to do is to adjust the amount of amps that I push into the battery so I know what rate I do. So I should be able to charge this up at 5 amp hours, and I should be able to charge this up at a 9 amp hour rate. This will help me do that. That's why I bought this one in particular. So that during off-grid situations, I can recharge these fast and get them back into action as needed. Because when I'm using these Ryobi batteries to run other items, I have to be able to rotate these batteries in and out. As they run out, I want to bring them out here to my power wall that I'm also going to be building. And that's another story. We'll talk about that. I talked about it a little bit, but I want to build a small power wall that is hooked up to solar, and it will be there mostly just to charge my lithium power batteries when the power is off. What am I going to do with it in the meantime? I don't know. I'm going to figure out something. That's why I haven't built it yet, because I don't even know how big of a power wall I'm really going to build. But I want to be able to build something that will stay charged, and the power goes down, I'll have solar charging that power wall up, and then I can tap into that power wall to recharge these at the same time. But I have to be able to charge them up pretty fast and get them back into action. So that's the theory. That's why I also bought this, is I want to be able to do battery charging and recharging quickly when there's no power. So as far as the 60 volt series, I got 3 Ryobi batteries that I hook up in series to give me a full 60 volts across 3 20 volt batteries. And when I plug that in, I then get 60 volts in. Means that I can get up to 58 volts out on the output if I need it. Most of the time, this 24 volt battery power charger, power unit will be all I really need. But I do want to have the capability of doing this. So that's the whole thing in a nutshell. And that's why I'm building this. Now, this thing is way too big. Also, I might mention, I'm going to make this much, much smaller. It's going to be a small little, probably not any bigger than this thing right here when I get done, except for it'll have 3 plug-ins out of, and that plug into 3 batteries to be able to set it up and use it with on here. So that unit is going to be much smaller than it is right now. And you'll see that when I get done. We'll go over the wiring to show you how I did it, so how I could use this to power this. And I'll be able to run this thing off of 1 Ryobi battery or off of 3 when I get done with the way I'm going to design it, as well as run it off of a normal PSU. So that's the whole thing in a nutshell. That's how this thing works. If you have any questions or thoughts about it, how to make it better, you're crazy, don't do it that way, let me know. I love to hear it all. So, and most of the time I actually learn from that stuff. Tim, I want to thank you for your question about going back and giving you more information about this. I hope I did enough. If you get a chance and you can afford to buy the RD60 series, it's a great little unit if you need a bench power supply. This is definitely a big step up from my ATX box setup that I've been using up to now. And this is going to be a very exciting addition to what I'm doing here. So anyway, I think that's about everything I wanted to talk about and explain to you. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Stay tuned, because we're now going to learn what I can do as far as charging batteries. And I am determined to make my own battery chargers that I can plug in, and I can adjust the amount of amps that you push into the battery, so I can decide how fast I want to charge a battery up if I want to, rather than having to just wait however long it takes at 2 amps an hour. So that's it in a nutshell. Most of that information on Ryobis is pretty top secret, it seems like. So I'm going to have to do some of my own experiments to see what you can and can't do with Ryobi batteries. But I think you'll find that Ryobi batteries as an emergency power source is not too bad, rather than having to go out and buy your own, all these power units that you can buy now, the solar generators and everything they call them. Those things are quite expensive, and for dollar for the amount of power you can get out of it and how long it takes to charge it, oh yeah. And I hope to try to overcome all those types of problems so that I can make a nice way, a easy, streamlined way of recharging my power units and keep them in service while I'm using it. I should be able to switch out my batteries without turning it off and having to take and bring it in here and charge the whole thing up. I'll be able to just switch out the batteries and bring the batteries in and charge them. So that's the way those things should be set up, so you can pull the battery off, put another battery on, and keep going. And I'm determined to get it done that way with my off-grid system that I'm going to be making. And I'm not going off-grid. I shouldn't call it that. It's fogs. When I'm forced off-grid, I got to survive. And that's what everything I do now is geared on, that idea of how can I get by now that I don't have any electric power. Now, the other last thing I want to talk about real quick here, and I'll let you go, is about heating. And they asked me, well, what about heating when the power goes off? And honestly, I probably have, until that person mentioned that, I had not thought about that a whole lot. And now I'm beginning to think I probably should give that some thought, because I use natural gas. And up to now, I've always thought, well, even when the power goes off, you still got the natural gas, because I can still run my furnace as long as I hook up a power to the electrical part of it. And that's what the generator helps me do. So I can run my furnace because the natural gas is still there. I can still cook because my stove will still work. So all these things are, I've always thought, if my power goes off, it's no big deal. And that's usually what I can have happen here in the United States in the Midwest. We don't have, if I lived in Florida, I'd have to think about all sorts of different things when you go off grid, because maybe you might even have to bug out. And don't get me wrong, I should have a good bug out system and process set up for if that happens, I can do it. And I haven't even started on that sort of thing really much at all. And that's one of the things I'm going to have to put together sooner or later. And with your ideas and your suggestions, I think we can do that. But right now, I think I maybe have to give some serious thought to what happens if I lose the natural gas. In today's world, I'm sorry. I'm so glad I don't live in Europe. And don't, no offense. It's not that I don't want to live there, but you guys are going to have a problem this winter from what I hear. And it's a shame that that's happening. But sometimes things go on in the world that you can't control. And right now, heating seems to be a real big issue. And it's going to be a big issue this winter. We're going to hear some horror stories, I think, come this winter. So, and with that in mind, I would like to also start thinking about how to heat my house if I lose the natural gas too, because they're talking about shortages, and if they do that and they start shutting off the natural gas that you can get in your at the house, I could have a real problem here. And so that's made me rethink again what I can and can't do and what I should or shouldn't do based on that sort of thing. So I'm going to probably put together a twofold system of how I would heat. I don't think I would ever have to change out and rechange my heating because I'm not going to lose all this stuff permanently. We are a civilized civilization. I mean, and so these things would get fixed. We're too dependent on them in this world, and they'll be able to get fixed. Just a matter of how and when. And so I don't think I have to say, well, I'm going to have to start cutting wood and doing wood stove and go to that kind of heat the rest of my life. And hope I don't have to, because chopping wood is hard work. But I do need to be able to heat my house, I think, if something happens and I lose my natural gas source that I have. There's a lot of them out there that use other types of fuel already, like fuel oil furnaces and that sort of thing. And they're talking about shortages even in the United States here in the Northeast for that sort of thing. And that just blows my mind that that may happen. It's bad enough you got to pay so much more that it gets hard to pay for these things. But when you can't even get it, whether you want it or not, that's even more scary. And so I am going to have to really force myself to look at that and how to heat the house. And I have some ideas. I've done a lot of it in the past, mostly for economic reasons. I've had a wood stove. I've never had a wood pellet stove, but I know how they work, and I would probably consider that sort of thing as an alternative. Again, I do these things not because it's less expensive. I would do them because I need something. Because if I lose my natural gas, I have to have something. So otherwise, I'll just bear down whatever the natural gas gives me, and what it costs is what it costs. Trying to change that out, though, if you lose that, you really should have some kind of alternative, just like I do with my electrical power now. So I've been giving this some thought, and I'm going to give it some talk about that. And maybe in my next episode, if you would, start thinking about that, what you think and what you do, what you would do, what would be a good idea, whether it's using kerosene or wood pellets, or any other alternative that's out there. Propane heaters aren't too bad either, but how available will propane be if we start getting shortages? Will propane become a shortage too? I don't know. So these are kind of the things I'm looking at. And short of an apocalypse, I think there's some things you can do to be ready for the foreseeable outages that can happen, both in heating and in electricity. And I'm going to have to start focusing more on my heating part of this too, now that I think about it. So tell me what your thoughts are. I'm going to sit down and tell you what I've been thinking about, what I can do and what I'm going to do for immediate, and some other alternatives that you can do based on how much money you really want to spend. Because there are ways you could set up alternative heating in your house if you needed to. So we'll go over that. If you have any interest in that, stick around. Besides all the other things that I do around here, I'm going to also start talking about that a little bit and been thinking about it. So your thoughts would be very appreciated and be very helpful for me to be able to come up with a good plan for myself, and maybe together we can come up with a good plan that you can also use too. So stay tuned for that. Any questions, any thoughts? Just leave them down below. I love to read them all. If you learned something here, you like this video, hit that like button. Lets me know that I'm doing something right. This coffee is really good this morning. I hope you brought your cup with you because we're now done. I appreciate you coming by. You can go get your cup of coffee. But most importantly, if you would, come back again because I'm nowhere near done. Thanks for staying to the very end, and we'll see you guys again very soon.